Awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming to this event. This is part of the All About Energy series, and this is just a couple of events I wanted to put together this winter to talk about energy efficiency, energy policy, and kind of help demystify the energy landscape in Maine and beyond. So my name's Meddy Smith. I'm the town sustainability coordinator, and I will be joined by two energy experts that have graciously joined us this morning to chat about energy policy related to solar energy. So our first speaker is Emily from the Maine Community Power Cooperative, and then we'll hear from Andrew from Revision Energy. So I will pass it over to them, and thank you both for coming again.
Awesome. Thank you, Meddy. So I'm Emily from Maine Community Power Cooperative, and we're just going to be talking about community solar, what it is and what's going on with the current policies. But first, just to introduce myself and our organization, I work on our community engagement team, and Maine Community Power Cooperative. We're a local consumer-owned energy cooperative, and so we own and operate and develop really small-scale community solar projects on behalf of our members to give them discounted electricity rates. And so kind of defining what community solar is, I'm sure everybody is kind of familiar with the concept in general, but essentially community solar is basically just a form of an off-site solar project that can serve multiple businesses or households. And so whether that's, a community solar project in a neighborhood or a municipality, or something really large scale, like a lot of large scale developers are building, huge farms, and anyone can subscribe to that. And so there's different models of doing that. So that includes that subscription where there's no ownership. You basically just sign up and you'll get discounted bills. There's a shared ownership model like Revision, which Andrew can touch on as well. And then there's also cooperative ownership like us. And so essentially they all function through the same means, which I'll talk about, called net energy billing. But it looks a little bit different on your bill and how the mechanisms of it actually work. And so net energy billing is kind of that legal mechanism that allows us to kind of offer these discounted electricity rates and get energy from a source that's either on your rooftop or on a community solar project and allow you to benefit from that lower cost of electricity. And so that net energy part is basically that difference between the amount of energy that's produced, so sent out from a solar array, and that's usually measured in units of energy called kilowatt hours, and then the difference of that energy that's used. So what's produced versus what's used. And so generally how it works is that power generation from a system, whether it's a system on your rooftop or a community solar array, is sent out into the grid. And so for every unit of energy that's sent out into the grid, there's 1 unit of an energy credit. And that can be used to offset your usage directly if you have a rooftop array, or it can be used to offset your usage in different ways that's managed by a community solar provider. And so community solar developers often will sell credits back to subscribers based on a portion of the farm. So normally how it works is they'll look at your usage, they'll say, okay, our solar farm will cover maybe 2% of this will cover your usage. And so we'll assign you that portion of a farm. And so often you'll get a bill from them and a bill from your utility. And that bill from them is based on what your portion of that solar farm is producing. And so they'll sell those credits that they're generated from the production of that portion. And then that brings your usage on your utility bill down to 0. You'll still pay the utility for delivery and fixed service charges, and then you'll pay for those credits. The model that we use is a little bit different, where we just assign credits based on your usage. So if you used 100 kilowatt hours this month, we would apply 100 kilowatt hours on your bill. And essentially it works the same way. It's just whether or not those credits are stored by you, the consumer, or by the community solar developer. And so basically each of these are just matching credits to the usage for each subscriber. And so again, kind of how it works, we briefly went through this, but so they produce clean energy, they'll send it out to the grid, and so for every kilowatt hour supplied, we, as an example, would get a credit kilowatt hour credit in our bank of credits. And so using that connected utility account, these net energy billing credits are then applied to your CMP bill, brings that usage to zero, and then you can either receive 2 bills or 1 bill. In our case, our default option is to pay 1 bill, where you pay us that discounted rate, and then we'll pay CMP or Versant or whoever your utility is on your behalf. And so a little bit of the history behind net energy billing and what's going on now and what has been going on. So in 2019, net energy billing was basically established and really incentivized. What the state wanted to do is they wanted to bring in a ton of solar development into Maine. And that was for a lot of good reasons. We want more local renewable energy because it strengthens our grid, it makes energy cheaper. And so they were really incentivizing a lot of out-of-state developers to come in and build huge energy farms. And so you probably saw a bunch of those go up. You probably got lots of mailers. You probably had people knocking at your door. And so a lot of that was because this policy passed in 2019 was really encouraging those developers. And so part of that was there was compensation that was tied to rate increases. So as our rates went up, those developers were incentivized, or they were able to be compensated, and they got more money. And so what the state said in this past session last fall is they said, okay, our goal to build all of this infrastructure, we wanted to build 750 megawatts, and we built 1,600 megawatts, which is way surpassing that goal. And they were looking at that compensation ties, and they said, okay, this is a little crazy now. You know, our rates are going up, these developers are getting a lot of compensation, and we've already met our goal. And so they went back and they reevaluated, and they put a stop to that compensation. And so what that did is it basically put a stop to a lot of the development that was going on with these large-scale developers. And so they were able to make exemptions for our cooperative as well as for revision because of the models of community solar that we do, and because they're so centered around community and people having an ownership stake in that. And so now, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next slide, but looking into more bills that will continue to regulate community solar. And so again, that LD 1777 was that bill that kind of said, hey, like, let's pump the brakes on this. We've reached our goal, and we really want to make sure that we're benefiting ratepayers. And so now there are many different bills that are in the session right now, as they just started this week. But one that we think is important is LD 1966, and that's an act to improve community solar programs in this state. And so what this does is it just continues to say, like, okay, how are we looking at these community solar developers, and is it actually benefiting ratepayers, and what protections do we need to put to make sure that ratepayers are actually being treated fairly? And so we also want to make sure that we can solidify exemptions for cooperatively owned projects and consumer-owned projects like ours and like the model that Revision has. And then coming next, as we are also in a new stage of federal tax credits ending and kind of looking at what the state is doing at this point. So the Department of Energy Resources, which was newly established, is working on drafting community solar policy. So in addition to some of this legislation, they're looking at options like time of use and generation. So if we think about all of the solar development that we've had in the state so far, all of that is kind of peaking in the middle of the day when there's a ton of sunlight. But then most of us are using our electricity when there's not so much sunlight. So we want to turn on our lights, we want to heat our houses when it's darker and colder. And so that kind of makes this mismatch between when our energy is produced and when our energy is used. And so that's why they're kind of looking at kind of balancing those curves out. And so looking at things like time of use and then incentivizing storage capacity so that we can kind of even that out and use all that energy that's being produced in the middle of the day when we need it at night. There's also some more upcoming legislation. There's the Energy Fairness Act that addresses a lot of concerns with utility fairness, whether people are able to be disconnected if they have children that are under 1 year old, or people who are on medical disabilities who need constant electricity. And so that provides further protections for them. There's a plug-in solar bill, LD 1930, and so this allows folks in other states, they call it balcony solar. So if you just like wanted to buy, a much less expensive solar system and plug it in and have kind of not as much of an investment as a rooftop array, but wanted to have some of your own production to bring down your electricity costs. That's a bill that will allow you to do that. And then there's also a lot of bills that are around community solar access and providing regulation for that, which includes 1966, and there are several others that are there as well. And then if you're interested in more resources, if you really want to get into net energy billing, there's a chapter with the Public Utilities Commission, and they have a bunch of resources to learn more information. The Office of the Public Advocate is basically the role of this person is to represent ratepayers and to present in front of the Public Utilities Commission. So if a utility like CMP wants a rate increase, the role of the public advocate is to defend the ratepayers. And there's also the Governor's Energy Office, which is a great resource. If you want to get involved with us, you can definitely ask questions. We have business cards and materials. We can work together as a community partner if you're part of an organization. And now we can do some questions, or we can also combine questions.
I have lots of questions, but I don't know if you want to wait.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, you're welcome to ask them now. I think maybe, yeah, I think we have enough time where we can split up questions.
Okay, wow, let me get myself organized here. Yeah, so I guess I know that LD 1777 kind of ended the net energy billing program we had, and a new one is supposed to be introduced. And so where does that stand, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so just to clarify as well, LD 1777 ended net energy billing for commercial projects and community solar. And so if you have rooftop on your roof, and maybe Andrew, you can correct me on this as well, but that remains the same. So if you have your own solar panels, net energy billing remains the same despite LD 1777. And there is a plan to like restructure community solar and what net energy billing, which is exactly what you're talking about. And I think what a lot of these bills are that are in front of the legislature right now, like 1966, is Representative Sophie Warren. She's a representative from Scarborough. And so what that addresses is basically more concerns tied to, and some of the things that are also talked about in the Energy Fairness Act. So how community solar providers, they can still function with net energy billing if they've had projects that were already agreed. And that's true in some cases, and it's not true in other cases, so it's a little bit confusing of where that line is. But some of those projects, and I think, for example, ours, we were granted an exemption. And so that was until the end of the year. So projects that we have had under a certain amount of construction or level of investment are able to continue. And so these regulations are basically saying, okay, we want to continue to make sure that these structures are in place in law, that community solar providers have to follow them for the ease of the ratepayer. And so that includes things like consolidated billing, where they have to have the option to present one bill. So instead of getting a bill from your community solar provider and a bill from your utility, which can be confusing of like, where am I saving money? Why am I getting two bills? Is it higher? They have to have an option to have one bill where you can see those savings.
Okay, so my understanding is then that you got an exemption because your project is already underway, and that then LD 1966 would probably put something in place that's more permanent for certain types of like either cooperative or community owned. Am I getting that?
So our exemption in LD 1777 was because we are a cooperative and because Revision's projects are cooperatively owned. Okay. And so that's where that exemption comes into play. And this law would also solidify that exemption. So the way that it was worded in 1777 was basically like, this is ending, but these ways of doing community solar have an exemption to the end of the year. And so we're just trying to solidify that to kind of continue and have those.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. I could keep going, but
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, maybe I'll let Andrew go up, and then if you have other questions, we can both answer as we go.
Great. No, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
So welcome. My name is Andrew Hikati. I am a design and sales manager at Revision out of our South Portland office. And I've been with Revision for 8 years now. So a little bit about Revision. We have been installing solar in Maine since 2003. So this is our 23rd year in business. And we are really driven by our core values. Be kind, be curious, be excellent, be clear, be responsible, and build a just and equitable electric future. This guides us in everything we do. We do a bunch of different technologies, but our focus is primarily in the solar space, but we also install heat pumps and heat pump water heaters, battery storage systems, electric vehicle charging stations. We are just over 400 employees. We have locations in Montville, right on Route 3 there between Augusta and Belfast, South Portland, which is our headquarters, right over by the jet port there, Enfield, New Hampshire, Brentwood, New Hampshire, and then North Andover, Massachusetts, and Westfield, Massachusetts. So we kind of cover all of New England, but our roots are here in Maine. We started in Liberty, which is right next to Montville, and where Emily is from. And back in 2003, as just four people, and we've grown over the years, setting ourselves apart, holding ourselves and the industry to a higher standard, and realizing that in order to go where we want to, we need to treat our employees, treat our communities, treat our environment with the utmost respect. And sometimes that means sacrificing profit and putting people and the planet first. And that really goes towards our B Corps certification, which we're super excited to have been accredited at 150 points this past year, which is at the upper echelon of B Corps certifications. And yeah, that's a little bit about Revision. We've installed about, this says 19,666. With our end of the year push, we've definitely over 20,000 projects across New England. A very large percentage of them are here in Maine. Again, we've been doing business in Maine longer than any of the other states, and it's really our roots. So kind of coming at what this session is all about is 2025 was a wild year. There was so much that changed across all our industries, lifestyles, but for solar specifically and renewable energy, a lot changed at both the state and the federal level. And left a lot of people scrambling because some of it came out of left field. Some of it was foreseen a little bit. But focusing on the state, Emily did a really great job kind of going through what happened in the state legislature in 2025. But there was a lot that happened. The first thing, this often goes overlooked, but is really important. LD 1270. For the first time in Maine's history, we created a Department of Energy Resources. So this is a department that has an elected or an appointed department chair, and it replaces the governor's energy office into a formal department. Really just kind of bringing the accountability of reaching Maine's energy goals, and also taking into account all of the important things about ratepayer fairness and what kind of got wrapped up in the past 4 or 5 years, and that back and forth between our renewable energy goals and also ratepayer fairness. So this is a really important step and came out of last session. LD 1777, enacted June 27th. Yeah, Emily touched on all of this really, so I'm going to breeze through it. But essentially, it ended the net energy billing program for front of the meter projects. So this is where there is no load on site. And so anything that is behind the meter is still has net energy billing. And so behind the meter is if there is load on site where the solar energy can come in and power that load. The biggest target of this was the tariff program. So the tariff program worked a little bit differently than a one-to-one net energy billing. The tariff program monetized kilowatt hour credits, and those could be put towards large scale, and that was behind the or that was in front of the meter. So that ended the tariff program, which was it served its purpose for the 4 years, as Emily touched on. It achieved the goals of that program, and now we are moving into the future and moving towards a slightly more fair net energy billing program. It had massive disruption. Kind of happened pretty quickly, and a lot of companies had built a business model and invested in Maine to build big front-of-the-meter projects. Brought a lot of jobs to Maine, a lot of investment to Maine. The abruptness of the nature kind of created a lot of headwinds. But we've moved past that. On the federal side of things, we also had a lot of disruption. There's no secret that a lot of the tax credits specifically for residential solar were sunsetted December 31st, 2025, so just a few days ago. That 30% federal tax credit had been in place for quite a while. It had a 10-year runway. It was supposed to expire in 2033, but got cut short. So on the Maine side of things, residential solar is still alive and well with net energy billing, one-to-one net metering, both on the member-owned community solar, so that carve-out that Emily was talking about is specific because with their model and with our model, it's Maine ratepayers that own these projects, whereas with subscription models, it is oftentimes out-of-state investors. And so that carve-out allowed those programs to continue on 1 megawatt or less. But on the residential rooftop side, net energy billing still is alive and well. And really, there's no danger of that sunsetting at this point. I mean, it will always get targeted, but it is widely liked by ratepayers in Maine, and honestly, the utilities in Maine, it benefits as well. And I can talk a little bit more about that later. But on the federal side, the residential tax credit ended December 31st. But on the federal side, the commercial tax credit is still in place through 2027 with some guardrails. So this is kind of just a little bit of a recap. In Maine, one-to-one net energy billing for residential solar still in effect. Efficiency Maine rebates for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters are still there. There's also going to be a new demand response program for battery storage to help incentivize that and to help strengthen the grid. That is a pretty new program, but should be people should be starting to be able to enroll in that early or late winter On the federal side of things, the incentives, what's left is there's USDA REAP grants, rural energy programs. These are funded by the USDA and are they're grants that small businesses can apply for to cover some of the costs for a lot of different things, but solar is also included in that. And then there's the 30% commercial tax credit and also depreciation, which allows you to deduct expense of a solar project. And then on the regional side of things, the incentives that are left are often overlooked in Maine, but renewable energy credits or certificates, as people call them, RECs, are an increasingly valuable way to help recover some of the initial upfront cost of renewable energy. So kind of to kind of step back and talk about what exactly is net metering or net energy billing. On a residential side, it allows you to send any excess kilowatt hours that you're not using in your home to the grid and receive a 1-to-1 kilowatt hour credit. And then, so let's use rooftop solar as an example. So your rooftop on a day like today is going to create a bunch of electricity right now. That electricity is going to go into your utility meter and feed, or go into your main electrical panel and feed whatever loads are on. So lights, refrigerator, heating, cooling, whatever else is happening. But like right now, it's a very likely, it's very sunny here today in Yarmouth, very likely that your solar would be producing more electricity right at this moment than your home needs. That excess flows out through your utility meter and effectively spins it backwards. Meters don't spin anymore, but you get the idea. It's a nice visual. And essentially you get a credit for every kilowatt hour you send to the grid. And then tonight, when you get home, you're still using electricity, sun's not shining, you're gonna draw back, and then your meter will spin forward. That will get registered as usage. And so that is net metering. And because we live in the Northeast, we get way more sun in the summertime than we do in the wintertime. And so typically solar systems will create more electricity in a month, April through September. So they'll create more electricity than the home needs in a particular month. And that will get credited as a kilowatt hour credit that you can then draw off of in November, December, January, and February when your solar production isn't very good. But your usage might be even higher, especially if you have heat pumps for your heating and cooling. This is a great graph. It's pretty complicated when you look at it, but I'm going to run through it quickly. This is from someone's rooftop solar monitoring. And right here is a great daytime graph. All the green that you see there is excess solar production. That's solar production that the home is not using. The red is the consumption for the home. So that's what it's consuming. And the blue is what it is self-consuming. So during the day, so the sun comes up, at 8 o'clock, the solar's producing, and the solar is going directly into the house and powering the loads in the house. Come 10 o'clock, the solar's creating more electricity than the home needs, and so so all the green there is electricity that is sent to the grid. So that is a snip from a daytime usage. Up in the upper right is a graph of what that looks like over the whole year. So your green bar is your solar production. So as you can see, April through September, those green bars are higher than the red bar, which is your consumption. So April through September, solar's overproducing. But in January, February, November, and December, the red bars are much bigger than the green bars. And so you're going to bank kilowatt hours from April through September to draw back in November, December, January, and February. And so that's a really good visual of what it looks like on a day and then over the course of the year. And that is from monitoring from a real rooftop solar system, which every rooftop solar system has monitoring access, both real time and throughout the life of the system. This is your CMP bill. So what I just showed was a picture from someone's monitoring. This is what it looks like on your CMP bill. So starting at the bottom of the top graph, you can see this was pulled from December 2023 to January 2024. This home used 1,075 kilowatt hours and only self-generated from its solar 147 kilowatt hours. But they had a bank of 2,000 kilowatt hours from the summer before, and to put towards that deficit. And then the next month, they also had 460 banked kilowatt hours to put towards their deficit. Come March, the generation is much bigger than the usage, and then you start banking back up again. And as you can see, as we move up that graph, the banked generation gets higher, and then until we get to December again, and then you start whittling away at it. On the far right column is your unused expired credits. This is something that folks should always keep an eye on. You have 12 rolling months to use any excess kilowatt hour credits. So whatever you overproduced in August of 2025, you would have until August of 2026 to use. And you always use your oldest credits first, but if you see them starting to expire, you can do two things. You can invest in another electric source, so another heat pump or an electric vehicle, or you can maybe rely on heat pumps if you have them more than you have historically. But regardless of if you have a subscription solar, community solar, if you're enrolled in subscription community solar, if you have an ownership style member-owned community solar share, if you have a cooperative share, you should keep an eye on that over there, because if they do expire, that means you are forfeiting those kilowatt hour credits. Now, you're not forfeiting them directly to CMP's benefit. They are, the Public Utilities Commission did mandate that any unused expiring credits get put towards low and moderate income households that are having trouble paying their bills, to put towards those bills rather than CMP profiting off of it. That's something that one thing that we see very commonly going to people's houses is that they've enrolled in a subscription style community solar farm 3 years ago. And they came online and they forgot all about that they ever enrolled in it. And then they're very confused. And that share is oversized for their system. And so a bunch of unused kilowatt hour credits start piling up over there, and they're expiring. They're paying for those anyways. So that's something that, whether you do rooftop solar, whether you do subscription solar, you should pay attention to that far. And this is on page 3 of your CMP bill. If you have any sort of, if you're part of any solar, rooftop solar, community solar, member-owned community solar, cooperative solar, any of it. So this is just kind of a review of how net metering works both from your solar monitoring and from your CMP bill. This is the biggest question that we get at Revision Energy is how do we read our CMP bill? And we're always happy to help that. And we look at them and work with them every day. And sometimes when you're enrolled, when you have a rooftop solar array and you have a community solar farm share, it can get really confusing. And we're happy to help if anybody wants to reach out. So a second incentive, so net metering is the foundation of solar in Maine, especially rooftop residential solar and member-owned community solar and cooperative solar. For rooftop or on-site solar systems, a rooftop or a personal ground-mounted system, you're also eligible to sell renewable energy certificates or credits, RECs. These are above and beyond your relationship with CMP. They are kind of like stock certificates in that you can sell your RECs on the open market to utilities that are kind of looking to meet their clean energy goals. Each state has different REC markets, but Maine's is becoming increasingly attractive. And if anything, the legislation, both on the federal level and the state level, because it has thrown a wrench into solar development and more specifically wind development, which also plays into the REC market, there's going to be less specifically wind generation on the market, which actually drives up the REC market. So it kind of a silver lining for homeowners, at least. Massachusetts has the most robust REC market in New England. It's oftentimes why folks from Mass feel like if they're not getting a 5-year return on investment, it's not worth it. It definitely still is worth it. In Maine, the REC value is $30 per renewable energy certificate. One renewable energy certificate equals 1 megawatt or hour or 1,000 kilowatt hours. So just for example, if a 10 kilowatt solar array, so that's your DC system size, if that generates 12,000 kilowatt hours per year, that would be 12 renewable energy certificates at about $360 in revenue per year. So not nothing, but not going to make it, but make you rolling in dough or anything. But if you take that $360 and you bring it out 20 years, that's a significant chunk of money, and also just helps with your annual cash flow. And all of our residential rooftop and on-site solar systems are eligible for the REC market. So we talked about net metering as the foundation of solar in Maine. We talked about RECs as adding value. The third thing is not really an incentive, but a reality that we're living in. And that is that New England and Maine specifically has some of the highest electricity costs in the country. That's driven largely by Maine, or New England doesn't have a lot of traditional electricity resources. So we're not sitting on a big deposit of natural gas or coal. Maine has a lot of hydro, and as anybody who's driven around Maine knows, but hydro has its pros and cons. And also, when we talk about utility rates, we talk about all of New England. ISO New England is kind of like what Maine New Hampshire, Massachusetts, parts of Vermont, and parts of Rhode Island all operate under, and they are all interconnected. And so while Maine has a lot of hydro electricity production as a renewable source of electricity, and very few natural gas electricity generation facilities, Massachusetts is almost exclusively natural gas that is being piped in from long distances and is very expensive. And the amount of electricity that's used in Massachusetts is incredibly large. Massachusetts rates drive up Maine rates, drive up New Hampshire rates, drive up Rhode Island rates. And so New England has some of the highest rates in the country. This coupled with the fact that we are seeing unprecedented electricity demand across the country. This is driven by data centers and AI and electric vehicle adoption, and as we specifically in the Northeast start to transition our heating to electricity sources such as heat pumps, that all drives up demand for electricity. And so, as you can see up here, these are like where the 2022 price was and where the forecast through 2025. This is put out by EIA, who does great energy forecasting. But electricity costs are going up everywhere, not just in New England. And so what that means is that solar is driven, the affordability of solar is driven by the electricity rate. It doesn't cost developers or Revision or any other solar company more money to build a solar system in an area with a lower utility rate versus a higher utility rate. And if you have a higher utility rate, the return on investment of that solar is going to be much higher and much quicker. This is Maine's electricity prices, 2001 to 2024. You can see the 15-year trend is 3.8 cents utility rate increase, or 3.8% year over year. The 10-year is 6%, and the 5-year is 11.4%. And that actually is going up again because as of January 1st this year, the utility rate went up 2 cents, or about 9%, again this year. So that where it dips down there, we're actually back up again, up to that top point. And in Versant territory, which is down East Maine and parts of Penobscot County and Aroostook County, that rate's even higher. And yeah, so if you take that out 25 years with a 5% utility rate escalator, which is what EIA believes we are looking at for the next 25 years, your utility rate in Central Maine Power as of today is about 26 cents per kilowatt hour. That's both your supply, transmission, and delivery. That's your total residential utility rate. If you take that out 25 years with 5% escalator, that's 83.9 cents per kilowatt hour. A typical solar project, if you take the cost of that residential rooftop solar project and divide it by the amount of electricity it's going to produce in 25 years, it has an effective utility rate of 10 cents per kilowatt hour. If you finance the project with a 20-year loan, it's 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So we often talk about locking in your utility rate. And this is the way you do that, because utility rates will continue to rise year over year at the very minimum with inflation. So just running through a sample project for rooftop solar, 11.8 kW system. That's your DC system size. 27 SOFAB 440 watt modules, a 10,000 watt inverter, Project cost, gross project cost, about 35,173, estimated to produce 14,425 kilowatt hours per year. If you multiply that 14,425 times our current utility rate, that's $3,750 worth of electricity that solar system is going to produce year over year. And what that looks like is essentially an 8-year return on investment. So essentially, you're going to pay that same amount of money to CMP in 8 years than you would for a solar project. A total net savings, which is like these numbers blow my mind when you extrapolate out 25 years. But this is for someone who uses a lot of electricity, roughly 14,000 kilowatt hours per year. But they'll save $126,000 over the course of 25 years, assuming a 5% utility rate escalator, which is what EIA is estimating. So that's where the incentive, the economics of rooftop solar really work. But not everybody can come up with $35,000 to put towards a solar project. We think of this as an investment, but there are a minority of people that can make that kind of financial commitment up front. And so where the most important part of solar adoption, residential solar adoption in Maine comes is with financing. And there are you have to put $0 down loans that are cash flow positive immediately. So meaning that your fixed monthly loan payment is equal to or less than your average CMP bill. And we can see this here as if you have a $200 CMP bill and your loan payment is $200, you're like, well, I'm just kind of trading one for one. But that CMP bill will rise over time. We've seen it for as long as we've been tracking this for 25 years, that it will continue to rise. And so that difference, whereas your solar loan, the orange line, stays flat. That bump is, we model that renewable energy certificates for 15 years because we don't really know what they're going to do in 20 years. So we kind of actually take them out at that point just to be conservative, but there's really no reason why it wouldn't continue on. That's why it bumped up a little bit there. And that's for a 20-year loan. And then after 20 years, you own the system completely. You're also welcome to pay off loans at any point in time. But the difference between the blue line and the orange line is all savings. And that's from putting $0 down up front. So we spent a lot of time just talking mostly about residential rooftop solar, but we also offer member-owned community solar farms, which not everybody has a perfect south-facing roof that can fit all of the panels that can offset your demand. And so member-owned community solar is an off-site solar farm that is owned by you and, well, I like to say 50 of your closest friends. And collectively, you own a farm together, and that farm produces electricity, and then you get that your portion of that farm as kilowatt hour credits on your bill. And so this is a much more inclusive model because you don't even need to own your home. It's available for renters. As long as you have a CMP bill, you can be involved in a member-owned community solar farm. You also can have rooftop solar and a member-owned community solar farm because as we increasingly electrify our life, it's rare that you find a roof that can offset all of the energy demands of a home, both traditional demands like refrigerators, lights, dryer, but also domestic hot water, heating, cooling, transportation. And so you can combine these things to get to 100% offset. And so, because solar is a really powerful resource, we also install heat pumps and heat pump water heaters for domestic heating and cooling, and also battery storage. So battery storage, the primary function of battery storage is to provide you power in the event of an outage. You can utilize batteries to help you, so with time of use metering coming, you can help arbitrage your rate a little bit, so that you can charge up your batteries with solar during the day, and then between 5 and 9 you can draw off of your battery at night. This is advantageous for folks in that their solar doesn't meet all of their demand, or if they're just investing in battery storage only. But if their solar's, whether it's a member-owned community solar farm or a cooperative solar share or rooftop solar, if it's meeting all of your annual demand, time of use metering actually doesn't help you, because 1 kilowatt hour out is equal to 1 kilowatt hour in. So the primary goal of battery storage is to provide you power in the event of an outage, just like a generator does. The benefits of battery storage is they are quiet, silent actually. They require no maintenance, and they kick on seamlessly, to the point that oftentimes people don't even know that they're running off of their batteries. You do get a push notification to your phone to let you know, so you can make smart decisions. Battery storage is still a slightly larger expense than a manual generator. You see a manual generator sitting over there, but it's on par with a whole house automatic transfer switch generator system. We talked a little bit about heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. There's some great images of them, but the whole idea is that you can move all of your energy sources to electricity and then power them with solar. And I think the last slide I got here is a little shot of a member-owned community solar farm, just to kind of show you the scale of it. I'm sure folks have seen them before, but the advantages are that you get economies of scale, and also all of the panels are facing due south with very limited shade, so that every panel is getting its maximized benefit. Whereas rooftops aren't always a great option. Just looking at these rooftops on the photo here, those are corrugated metal barns that are hard to install rooftop solar on, and often, as Maine Community Power Cooperative and us, when we're looking for land, we are looking for very specific land that doesn't really have any other use case. So a lot of time it's farmland that is not usable anymore. So it's not replacing farmland. It is in conjunction with farmers. And then sometimes lots that are undevelopable from building housing or agriculture or grazing fields. But then there's also increasingly agrivoltaics, which essentially incorporating solar arrays with growing seasons as well. So yeah, that's kind of what I got today. Having trouble with the mouse. There we go. And any questions? Yeah, great.
Yeah, full disclosure, I write a environmental Substack.
Great.
So, but I appreciate your taking the time, and hopefully it'll get communicated to more people than just me.
Yeah.
So my first question is just a curiosity one. So in around 2018, 2017, I worked with Revision to put 188 solar panels on a church here in Yarmouth.
Yeah.
And we did that as a power purchase agreement.
Yeah.
And it worked out beautifully for us. You know, we paid it off after the 7-year, credits ran out and so on. Now, I'm just curious whether those kinds of projects are being done anymore or not, the power purchase agreements.
Yes. So your specific project, or that specific project, is definitely a project that can be a power purchase agreement where it's a rooftop array. It's below a certain size, and then there's still there's still impact investors out there willing to, essentially take the financial burden and then sell the power to the church until they can have a
Actually,
means buyout.
Revision took that.
Yeah, and so we've done this for a while. Because of legislation and because of federal policy, the economics of those shortens the project scopes. So traditionally, we did a lot of PPAs for larger schools. So a lot of the school districts in southern Maine have PPAs with us where we've built a big 3 to 4 megawatt solar array, and and there's an impact investor. Sometimes it was Revision, sometimes it was others, who essentially made the initial financial investment and then sold the electricity off until that off-taker was ready to take over ownership. That still exists, although legislation has made it a little bit more difficult, especially because of the front of the meter LD 1777.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's still possible, though not as, more difficult, exactly.
I mean, the best part of it was that basically I could tell the congregation, no upfront cost.
Yeah.
I could just do this,
Yeah.
right? And so it was easy. I had to get a vote
Yeah.
to do it, and that was easy because
Yeah.
of the way it was set up.
We've done a lot of them over the years, that's essentially, for people who are watching in, that a PPA is a power purchase agreement where essentially you're agreeing to buy the power that's created by the solar array at a agreed upon price, with the option to buy out the array at a future date.
So other sort of questions, you mentioned that when the credits expire after 12 months, some of those go to offset low income?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the Public Utilities Commission passed this law maybe 3 years ago, maybe it's two years ago, where essentially, because there's actually a very surprisingly large number of kilowatt hour credits that do expire every year. And when they expire, CMP technically does not own them. And so they can't just take them. And so, but because of the net energy billing rules, they have to go somewhere. And so the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, mandated that they go towards low to moderate income folks who need assistance on their bills.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes for all expiring credits, from subscription farms to cooperative farms to rooftop solar to, yeah.
And you mentioned also that Maine recs were getting more attractive. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, so the rec market is a very complicated one, but essentially it's all about forecasting of what the value of those carbon offsets are. So recs are essentially you're offsetting carbon footprints, and so utilities do that. Big corporations do it all the time. The reason why we've always modeled them for 15 years because we knew there's a massive amount of wind that's was was being developed. And those wind also puts RECs into the REC market. As more RECs go into that market, that cost was going to, the value of those RECs come down. Because specifically offshore wind in this country and in the Northeast is on hold indefinitely and not being developed. That has caused the REC market to be more optimistic with their values going forward. Significantly more optimistic with REC aggregators offering pretty attractive upfront REC payments. So you can actually either choose to get your payments quarterly, or you can get it all upfront at once for a lower rate. But they're so optimistic about it that they are willing to offer an upfront buyout.
And a related question is that, when we did the power purchase agreement, one of the reasons why it was attractive to Revision was because we, as a church, we were a nonprofit, so we couldn't actually claim the RECs.
Yeah.
Is that still the case, or is there some change? I'm sort of vaguely thinking there's some change in that.
Yeah, so under the Inflation Reduction Act, nonprofits, and I want to be careful how I say this here because not all nonprofits qualify, but typically nonprofits such as schools and churches and a variety of other businesses don't have any tax liability. And so the way the tax credit has historically worked is it's a credit against your tax liability. If you don't have any tax liability, you can't get the tax credit. With the Inflation Reduction Act, that actually made it a direct pay to nonprofits, to certain tax filers who are nonprofits. And so they could actually get a direct pay of that tax credit. And that does still exist through 2027 with significant guardrails. But we are, there's a lot of guardrails, but we are working through it.
Okay, yeah, sometimes that's called a refundable
exactly.
tax credit, because I remember that from the historic building tax credit. So
Yes, you nailed it. So
Yeah.
that's a refundable tax credit. It's only eligible for certified or nonprofit tax filers under a certain listing, but most, whereas like the residential 25D and the ITC for commercial are both non-refundable. So you have to have the tax liability for that. But if you file as a nonprofit, then you can get a refundable tax credit.
So another topic that I don't really see much written about is improving efficiency of solar panels. Like, what I'm thinking to myself is that the ones that we installed in the end of 2017 are probably not as good as what you install today, but I don't really know that. So can you comment?
Yeah, I will speak to residential rooftop solar, and Emily can speak to larger scale format panels, but it's all really the same in that the technology that goes into solar panels is monocrystalline silicone. It conducts electricity at best at about 24%. So that means that 24% of the total energy that hits the panel is converted into electricity. That's about the peak. There's forecasts saying that silicone panels could potentially get to 28 at some point in time. But really, that's kind of the peak. There is a lot of research going and other types of solar panels out there, but they're cost prohibitive right now. And because mono and polysilicon, crystalline silicone panels are the least expensive they ever have been, it's okay that they've kind of peaked out at their efficiencies. Forever we saw, essentially panels being getting more and more efficient year over year. Right. Over the past 5 years, we've seen it plateau, and to the point where, on the residential scale, have standardized the size of a solar panel, and the only way you get more watts per solar panel is you make it a little bit bigger or a different shape. With commercial, I'll let Emily talk about it a little bit, but there's also bifacial panels, which is kind of a cool thing where it allows some of that energy to pass through the panel and then reflect off and get absorbed again. A lot of ground mount and bigger solar arrays and farms utilize that. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, also Maine Community Power Cooperative also utilizes like maybe single access trackers, so you can talk about that.
Yeah, so for our projects, we use either dual axis trackers or single axis trackers. So they're actually mounted on kind of like what looks like a pole, and then they have these like moving mechanisms. Yeah. And so they'll follow the sun, and the dual axis trackers are smaller and more square, so they can do it in 2 different directions. And then the single axis is kind of just like an arm that can like tilt and follow the sun on that one axis. And so that also allows us to, because our projects are so small scale, we're only installing on 1 acre of land, and they're 150 kilowatt projects. And so that allows us to have more production for a smaller square footage. So because they're kind of maximizing the sun and they can move and follow that, that adds to their production.
That's cool, yeah, that's great. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, trackers are really cool, both single axis and dual axis trackers, and especially what they're doing is really innovative, and because there's also a lot of like permitting size restrictions, and trackers allow you to create the same amount of annual production with a lower kilowatt peak power output, because it's essentially following the sun and it's getting peak production throughout the entire day rather than at your single point of time. Really cool stuff. There's
it is really cool.
Yeah, and I'll say to that as well, like it also allows us to have much more viable project sites. So if we think about like all of the boom of solar development, all of those developers, because they're looking to build huge projects and they need like 3-phase infrastructure and enough land, there's only so many places within Maine and on the grid where there's enough land, it's cleared, and it's connected to 3-phase power. And so because our projects are so small and we can connect to single-phase lines, so it doesn't need as much infrastructure, there's a lot more that opens up that we can do that other larger scale developers couldn't do.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting question. I don't know if you'll be able to help me with this one, but so I've had arguments with oil and gas folks, and they always seem to be talking about energy density, okay? And what they're sort of saying is that you could get more calories out of certain fuels than others. But where I kind of get confused is like, is there a way to talk about energy density when it comes to the sun, or is it just completely a different thing, and so it just doesn't even, there is no comparison, I guess. I don't know how to respond to this argument that I'd be getting. Would love to know if you have some really great wording I could use.
Yeah, so what generally they refer to is a natural gas power plant is going to be much smaller and can generate a lot of electricity on a smaller footprint than a solar field can generate the same amount of power. So the smaller footprint, the argument to that is that gas, oil, coal are finite resources. Yeah. The sun is not a finite resource, it's an infinite resource. And so pulling gas, oil, coal out of the ground, while you might have a energy production facility that is a smaller footprint, the footprint that goes into pulling it out of the ground is massive, and also piping it across the country all over the place, extracting it from oil wells in the Gulf, or we won't go there, but the sun is an infinite resource.
Right.
It will forever be there, and if it stops being there, we're all in trouble.
So it does seem kind of spurious, I guess, to talk about the footprint of things on the ground when you have all these huge externalities, i.e. emissions going up into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, am I off track here? I mean, that's kind of the way I would see it. Yeah.
And I think too, and I don't actually know what the numbers are, so maybe this is not gonna be helpful, but it's like X amount of hours of the sun shining onto like the surface of the earth is like all of the energy that we would use in a year. And so, like, yes, that resource is there. No, solar panels aren't going to like capture all of that and run everything like tomorrow.
Right.
But I think looking at that potential of, okay, if we continue to invest in renewable energy and invest in like innovations of ways of making it better to capture that energy and then use it, like that's much more of a worthwhile investment because that energy resource is there. It's not as extractive and destructive as fossil fuels, and it's there forever.
Right.
So I think those are just kind
Well,
of.
and I think also related to this is the fact that, investors are selling a product on an ongoing basis and making a profit from it. So I'm talking about oil and gas, whereas it's harder to make a profit from the sun. You have to, you sell electrons, I guess, but you're not mining and extracting and shipping anything, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a large part of why our utility costs are so high in Maine, is because a large percentage of it is natural gas and hydropower that we're getting from Canada and other parts of the New England grid. But if we think about having to transport all of that natural gas, like Andrew was mentioning, like it's not in Maine, so
Right.
we're paying for
To get it here.
To get it here.
Yeah, very true. So, and you probably said how are you building one facility or multiple ones? You probably
Yeah.
said it, but I didn't catch it.
That's okay. So we have multiple projects. So each
Okay.
project is 1 acre of installation, and there's another acre around it for like setbacks and shading.
Oh, okay.
So one project is 2 acres. We have 2 projects that actually just went live yesterday, which is so
Oh,
exciting.
congratulations.
Thank you.
That's cool.
And then we have like 19 additional projects that are in the pipeline, 8 that will start construction in the spring.
Wow. And for each little project, how many subscribers or owners? do you have?
Yeah, so it's roughly 50 members per project.
Okay.
And obviously that fluctuates depending on
Yeah.
individual usage.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. Great. I think that's what I have for now. I would love to get your presentations if that would be possible.
Absolutely.
This recording will be posted, and the slides we can ask to make those available as well. But thank you so much to our presenters for sharing all of that information. That was very, very interesting. And I will also try to link some of the resources you mentioned and the informational resources as well, so folks can access that, because it's a very complicated landscape and it's changing, like you mentioned. So we're thankful for you taking the time to share with us from your perspectives. I will just also take a moment to note that there's one more event in this wintertime series on February 12th here at Merrill Library at noon. That will be a little panel discussion between Efficiency Maine, a local energy contractor, and a Yarmouth resident who has made energy upgrades in their home. And we're just going to be talking about how to prioritize energy efficiency and electrification upgrades. So I hope to see folks there, but thank you again so much. Cool.